Football represents something we are.
Football is like life. You gotta push.
Fantasy football is about proving that you are better than your friends.
Hold up.
Welcome to the Fantasy Football Faceoff.
I'm gonna do what's best for the team.
Where fantasy meets reality.
Pure fantasy football nirvana.
And now your hosts.
Let the games begin.
Anthony Cervino and Michael Hoff.
And welcome back to the FF Faceoff, where fantasy meets reality. It is always a pleasure to have you with us for an absolutely loaded final Minicamp takeaways edition of the most dynamic fantasy football podcast on the planet, which is now part of the brand new full-time fantasy podcast network. And as always, we have a lot to talk about right now.
Whippleman, of you peons, just stand up on your feet and show respect to the man who rules the world.
Coming to you live from the FF Faceoff studio at the beautiful Jersey Shore, I am your host, Anthony Cervino. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at The Real NFL Guru. And while you're at it, don't forget to follow the show at the FF Faceoff as well. You can find us on all of the top social media platforms. If you're watching us right now on YouTube, Facebook Live, Periscope, Twitter, or Twitch, welcome to the big show. And if you're joining us right now in podcast format on iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Spreaker, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Alexa, TuneIn, or Apple Podcasts, thanks for stopping by. But before we get to the action, here is a public service announcement from His Lordship.
Promotional consideration paid for by the following.
All right, guys, you know the drill. If you like today's episode and subscribe to our channel, please leave us a comment saying that you have subscribed. And once you're done, we will reply back to as many as we can to show our appreciation to you. I always like to remind you that we are a cost-free production here at the FF Faceoff, but just because we are a cost-free production, it doesn't mean that a lot of time doesn't go into our efforts in terms of pre-production, post-production, and research. And because we do bring you a cost-free program, all we ask for in return are some cost-free engagements and interactions. Things that you can do right now as you're watching the show or as you're listening to the show in podcast format. Every time somebody subscribes and hits the alert icon so you can be notified anytime that we are live or upload. Anytime you tell everybody you know about the FF Faceoff, it helps more than you can imagine. Because every subscription, engagement, every time you share, it never, ever, ever goes unnoticed. We see our podcast analytics, they're booming. They're still booming after all these weeks. I've been telling you they are, and they absolutely positively are. We see our YouTube analytics and YouTube subscribers slowly creeping up. Of course, we do want that to grow at a little bit more rapid pace, but we'll take it as it comes, and we do see that, and we thank you in advance. So please, tell your family, tell your friends, tell every single person you know that the FF Faceoff is the best damn fantasy football podcast on the planet, where fantasy meets reality. Tell everybody you know that we will indeed help you win fantasy football championships in 2019 and moving forward. And in advance, I do want to thank you as usual.
And that's an order.
Now that that's all out of the way, let's get right into the action. And today's episode, we will be focusing on the biggest NFL news of the day. And let's start right now with, of course, the Pittsburgh Steelers and Ben Roethlisberger. Now, Ben Roethlisberger recently told the press that he is looking forward to getting back to normalcy. Yes, you heard that right. He is looking forward to getting back to normalcy in the locker room, with the team, and I get it. But let's have this conversation first, right? We all have delusional people in our lives. And those same delusional people, they never seem to change. Maybe it is an intrusive, overbearing, and abrasive mother-in-law. Maybe it's a sibling or a friend that never wants to grow up. You know, baby Huey syndrome, as I love to call it. And how you deal with these people, or how you allow or disallow these people, affect your life. If you set the tone, if you set the boundary early, 9 times out of 10, they will adapt. However, if you continuously make excuses for the behavior and continue to enable them, it will not only continue, but it will progressively get worse the more you enable them to do it. And while you enable the behavior and it worsens, their delusion allows them to feel like their behavior is warranted because nobody is saying a word. So it must be okay, right? So let's pull Big Ben into this equation. For 15 years, Big Ben has been the quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And with that has come a Super Bowl appearance or two and a Super Bowl win. Or maybe a couple. Maybe I'm losing track. Therefore, since the Steelers really have been brought back to prominence during Ben Roethlisberger's reign, he is, in theory, the mother-in-law. You make excuses for his behavior. And now Big Ben is saying, well, Antonio Brown is gone. Le'Veon Bell is gone. These distractions are gone. So we're going to get back to normal. But in reality, has it ever been normal in Pittsburgh with Big Ben? And you can bring back the timeline. You know, Big Ben riding the motorcycle or whatever it was, a motorcycle accident with no helmet. Big Ben sexual assault allegations. Big Ben fighting with this receiver and that receiver because it happened before Antonio Brown. And I'm pretty sure it happened before Martavis Bryant. And Big Ben, fighting with Todd Haley. So maybe, just maybe, we will finally see that the issue, the nucleus, is probably Big Ben, and we are going to see that in 2019. Because I don't believe the Steelers are going to make the playoffs. I believe the Steelers will miss the playoffs for the second straight year, and I don't even know the last time that happened. From a fantasy football perspective, it seems like the stars are aligning for Big Ben to regress as well, right? Big Ben last year finished as the QB3. Steelers passed the ball more than any other team. No more Le'Veon Bell, but he wasn't there anyway last year. No more Antonio Brown, who has been a staple, a safety net for Big Ben for a long, long time. And I get you have Juju, but Juju can't do it all. Juju also is going to be facing the top opposing cover corner every snap. Something that he really didn't have to do before because you had Antonio Brown affording that luxury, if you will. The question is, and I posted this on Twitter, who's going to be the number 2 Pittsburgh Steeler pass catcher in targets? And I'm hearing a lot of Dante Moncrief hype. For me, it's been there, done that. You know, we've been waiting for Dante Moncrief to break out for a long time. 2015, 2016, he was hurt. 2017, no Andrew Luck. 2018, bad quarterback, bad offense in Jacksonville. And all of a sudden, you're going to go to Pittsburgh and you're getting raves. Apparently, the latest news is that the Pittsburgh beat writer Mark Cabaloy is reporting Dante Moncrief looks like a slam dunk number 2 receiver. Well, what else do you have? You have a rookie in Deontay Johnson, who, okay, he looks okay in camp. And you have James Washington, who was out-targeted last year by Vance McDonald, Antonio Brown, Juju Smith-Schuster, Ryan Switzer, James Conner. I don't know if James Washington is it. In my opinion, and I hate using that, I hate using those words, and I said this on our last show, which you can go back and find in the archives. I believe Vance McDonald is in line to be the number 2 in targets on the Steelers in 2019. McDonald was 3rd last year behind the aforementioned wide receivers. There's going to be 207 vacated targets combined between the losses of Jesse James and Antonio Brown. And he has a rapport, a pre-existing rapport with Ben Roethlisberger. You can't say that about Deontay Johnson. You can't say that about Dante Moncrief. You really can't say it about James Washington because it didn't look like they had it going on last year. So if you ask me, right now, I am buying Vance McDonald everywhere I can. And if you're going to ask me who's going to be that wide receiver, I think it's going to be a mix. I think we can see a wide spread of targets between Washington, Moncrief, Ryan Switzer, who I feel like is severely flying under the radar. Ben Roethlisberger clearly has a rapport with Switzer, and they like Switzer because he's a versatile playmaker out of the slot. I think he's flying under the radar. So it's Juju, it's Vance, and then there's going to be a mixture of wide receivers trying to command that number 2 wide receiver role. Moving on off of Big Ben, because I absolutely love talking truth about Big Ben, we have James Conner. And James Conner told the press that he expects the team to spread out backfield touches pretty evenly. And I quote, in 2019, that happened at the end of last week, I believe. And we saw a little bit of traction on fantasy football Twitter, people trying to sell Conner, people worried. And then Mark Cabaloy of The Athletic, Pittsburgh Steelers beat writer, is now reporting that he believes that it is lip service coming from the running back more than anything else. And it wouldn't surprise me if it was. And I'm not the biggest James Conner guy, but I do believe he showed enough to garner every opportunity to be the Pittsburgh RB1. Moreover, for all these years, whether it was Le'Veon Bell, even when Le'Veon Bell was suspended or hurt and D'Angelo Williams had to fill in, there was no real split. D'Angelo Williams was the guy. The Steelers employ a one-man backfield, and they will spread out touches. They will spell the starter here and there, but It is James Washington's backfield to lose, and if he's going to lose anything, I believe James Conner will lose a few passing down opportunities to Jalen Samuels, who looked the part when he had his opportunity last year. Right now, I wouldn't go crazy selling my James Conner stock. In 13 games, he finished as the PPR running back 6. Right behind Zeke and right in front of James White, also in front of Melvin Gordon. I believe James Conner, who just missed rushing for 1,000 yards, and he would have done that if he would have played another game or so. He also caught 55 of 71 targets for 497 yards and a touchdown. He's shown that he can carry a full 3-down workload. My biggest issue with James Conner is that he fumbled 4 times and lost 2 of them. I don't care what system or where you play. If you put the ball on the ground and you lose more than 1, because any more than 1, it is no longer an accident. It is no longer an anomaly. Then you could face losing your job in the National Football League, because these coaches don't care about your fantasy football team. They care about winning. And when you're turning the ball over to the other team, you're probably not going to win a lot of games. Moving out of Pittsburgh, Jacksonville Jaguars running back Leonard Fournette expects to be a big part of the passing game in 2019, and you know how I feel about Fournette. I talked about him a bunch on in the recent episodes. I also talked about him in the undervalued, overvalued running back show that I did a few weeks back, and a lot of people undersell Fournette in the passing game, and I don't think you should. I think Fournette is a lot better catching passes than anybody wants to give him credit for. And go back to his rookie year, caught 36 of 48 targets, 302 yards, and a touchdown. No, that is not eye-popping statistics, but it's right in line with what Ezekiel Elliott did in his rookie year in the NFL. And now look at Zeke. A couple of years later, he really began making strides in the passing game in his year 3, and now entering year 4, he is expected to be a 3-down juggernaut, especially making a bigger impact in the passing game. And I expect much of the same from Leonard Fournette entering his year 3. My biggest issue with Fournette isn't his impact catching passes, is if he can stay healthy and on the field, because we all know when Leonard Fournette is healthy and on the field, he is one of the most productive running backs that there are out there. You know, if Nick Foles can be better than Blake Bortles, and that shouldn't be hard, Leonard Fournette could be a steal, as he is going in the 3rd and 4th rounds, especially if he is sliding in drafts. This is a true 3-down player who himself is his own worst enemy. If Leonard Fournette can stay healthy and play 14 to 16 games, dare I say, top 5 to 6 running back upside if Leonard Fournette can stay healthy for 14 to 16 games. And that is not far-fetched at all. In 2017, his rookie year, I believe he finished as the PPR RB 8 in 13. So 14 to 16, for me to say top 5, top 6 is not far-fetched whatsoever. Let's see if there's anything else in Jacksonville before we move on. Yeah, beat writer Mike DiRocco is reporting Chris Conley has been the team's best wide receiver during OTAs and minicamp. Do we really care? The Jaguars are waiting for somebody to break out, and it could be Chris Conley. You know, it could also be Marquise Lee, another player who has been productive in the past, especially in PPR leagues. But Marquise Lee gets bitten by the injury bug year after year. Keelan Cole is another popular name who flashed 2 years ago, and we're waiting for him to return to that glory. To me, my best bet of Jacksonville pass catchers is D.D. Westbrook. D.D. Westbrook is versatile. He plays in the slot. He can do a little bit on the outside. I think D.D. Westbrook could be that breakout receiver if there is one in Jacksonville. I like him a lot more than I like Chris Conley. And I'm not saying Chris Conley can't get the job done, but Chris Conley has been buried on the Chiefs depth chart for a number of years, and he might finally get his opportunity to shine. However, he is going to have to outperform Marquise Lee, Keelan Cole, and D.D. Westbrook. Can Conley do it? I don't know. I think the quickest way for Conley to see the field is if Marquise Lee suffers another injury, and that might be a bet I'm willing to take considering the past. Moving out of Jacksonville, let's go to the Colts. And the Indy Star believes Colts head coach Frank Reich wants Marlon Mack to carry the load. And I quote, for the team's backfield in 2019. We all expect Marlon Mack to be the guy. That is what we all anticipate in the fantasy football world. Right now, Marlon Mack's ADP, let's see where we are. Marlon Mack is going as the 16th running back off the board, 6th pick in the 3rd round. Last year, Marlon Mack in 12 games finished as the RB21 in PPR, 908 yards rushing, another 103 yards receiving. Not much in the passing game, which tells me that there's going to be another running back catching passes. It's probably going to be Nyheim Hines again. So expect a heavy dose of Marlon Mack on early downs. And if he is going to be spelled, it's going to be by Nyheim Hines. I like Nyheim Hines a lot, but we are already seeing the beat writers say, hey, listen, this guy is not going to catch 60 passes again because of the addition of Paris Campbell. And why not? Paris Campbell is a dynamic playmaker, can do special things in the open field, so why not try to get the ball in his hands? I do still buy into Nyheim Hines a little bit because the biggest knock on Marlon Mack are the injury concerns. Because if Marlon Mack goes down, I'm not one who believes in Spencer Ware. If Marlon Mack goes down, I think we are going to see a heavier dose of Nyheim Hines with a mixture of Spencer Ware. But while Marlon Mack is healthy, it's going to be a heavy dose of Mack with a little bit of Nyheim Hines sprinkled in, whereas should Marlon Mack go down, expect a more even split between Hines and Marlon Mack. For a guy like Jeremy Wilkins, he reportedly is on the roster bubble himself. A little bit more of Colts news. Zach Kiefer, the beat writer, is reporting Jack Doyle is running routes at full speed. That is good news for Doyle, who is coming off the hip. Colts beat writer Kevin Bowen believes Paris Campbell should be in the mix for the wide receiver spot, wide receiver 3 spot. We touched on Paris Campbell a little bit a few minutes ago. You have T.Y. Hilton and Devin Funchess. They are going to be your starting outside receivers, which means all Paris Campbell has to do is beat out Chester Rogers for the slot wide receiver 3 spot. And Paris Campbell is coming in with a ton of hype. Dynamic playmaker. I know that Chester Rogers has reportedly had a good offseason, but if Paris Campbell is everything that we believe he is going to be, then beating out Chester Rogers should be fairly easy, which means we are going to see Paris Campbell get significant playing time in his rookie year, which is why he is one of the few rookie wide receivers that I am targeting more or less in the double-digit rounds. In redraft leagues and dynasty, he is one of the top rookie wideouts I am targeting, obviously, in dynasty leagues and in rookie drafts. One more thing out of Colts camp, the beat writers are predicting a breakout year for Mo Alley Cox. He is one of my guys. I like Alley Cox a lot. It's a pretty crowded depth chart of tight ends with Eric Ebron and Jack Doyle. Doyle's coming off the hip. Ebron has dealt with issues in the past. However, Alley Cox was utilized in the red zone last year, so it wouldn't surprise me if the Colts used all three tight ends. I do believe Doyle, if he's healthy, is going to be a safety blanket for Andrew Luck. I do believe Doyle will see his targets when he is healthy and in the game. Alley Cox, much like Devin Funchess, is going to eat into Eric Ebron's target share, Eric Ebron's red zone and end zone target share. Excuse me. And I said it on the tight end episode a show ago that I am fading Eric Ebron, and I'm taking a guy like Vance McDonald. And if I do want to take a shot at a Colts tight end, rather than take a shot at Eric Ebron, who looks like, with the way the Stars are relying on Indianapolis, Ebron is poised to regress, I'd rather take a shot on Jack Doyle in the, double-digit rounds, less risk, high reward, if Jack Doyle can rebound from his hip and stay healthy, because we know that Jack Doyle and Andrew Luck has a tremendous rapport when they're on the field together. He's the Colts tight end that I will buy in 2019 because he's at a much cheaper price. A lot of news out of Philadelphia. More tight end news. The Philly Inquirer believes Eagles tight end Dallas Goedert looks capable of making a tremendous second-year leap into stardom during the offseason program, and we have seen Goddard get a lot of hype. They are talking him up a ton. This offseason, they are praising him. It's not far-fetched to say that Zach Goddard is going to see an increase in targets. But come on, there is still a player named Zach Ertz playing for the Philadelphia Eagles. Zach Ertz, who was targeted roughly 9.6 or 9.7 times per game by Carson Wentz. Despite the addition of Deshaun Jackson and J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, who we will get to in a few minutes, despite the presence of Alshon Jeffrey, Zach Ertz is probably going to be the most targeted Philadelphia Eagles pass catcher again in 2019. I think that we could see an increase in Doug Peterson's usage in two tight end sets. But as long as Zach Ertz is healthy and playing and productive, it is hard for me to buy into Dallas Goedert. Maybe in best ball for when he pops off for a touchdown or a two-touchdown game. Maybe in DFS, or especially if Zach Ertz gets hurt and misses a game or two, which we have seen in the past. But I can't really buy into Dallas Goedert leaping into stardom while Zach Ertz is still on this team. Goddard last year, 33 of 44 targets, 334 yards, 4 touchdowns. He had, I believe, a 70 or 75-yard touchdown against the Cowboys called back. I like Dallas Goedert a lot. But my biggest issue, of course, is Zach Ertz. Possibly if you're in a league where you can start 2 tight ends, then I'll be all over Dallas Goedert. But in your standard tight end leagues, I'm probably going to fade him and look elsewhere for tight end production. And let me pull up tight end ADP right now. And Dallas Goedert is going as the 21st tight end off the board. You're not paying a ton for him. But Chris Herndon, who is facing a 2-game suspension, I'd rather go Herndon over Goddard just because he is the only tight end of note on the Jets. And Herndon is going as the 22nd tight end off the board. And right before Goddard, Fant is going. And right before Fant, these are all 14th round guys. Trey Burton is going. And right before Burton, Jack Doyle is going. And right before Doyle, you have Jimmy Graham and Jordan Reed. I get all the hype surrounding Dallas Goedert. But if you're going to ask me, am I going to take Jimmy Graham, Jack Doyle, Trey Burton, Noah Fant, or Chris Herndon over Dallas Goedert and your standard start 1 tight end league? Absolutely, positively will. 100% of the time. The only time this changes is if Zach Ertz suffers a significant injury. That is absolutely positively it. In your 2 tight end leagues, yeah, then I'll take a shot on Goddard maybe a little bit earlier because he does pose tremendous upside, versatility, and playmaking ability. And I do believe we will see an increase in 2 tight end sets from the Philadelphia Eagles in 2019. All that said, Eagles wide receiver Nelson Aguilar is sitting out of minicamp with a lower body injury. Surprise, surprise. I don't think Nelson Aguilar ultimately makes this team. If it wasn't for his contract, I do know the Eagles would love to trade him. I also know that this is probably going to be the last year that Nelson Aguilar plays for the Philadelphia Eagles. NJ.com is reporting that Carson Wentz's chemistry with Deshaun Jackson has been on point. Another narrative that we've heard since Deshaun Jackson signed with the Philadelphia Eagles. You know, Deshaun Jackson is on the back end of his career. He can still absolutely make plays. I still think he will have fantasy football value. But come on, this is going to be Ertz and Jeffrey. They are going to more than likely be your target leaders on the Eagles. Deshaun Jackson will probably come somewhere around 3rd or 4th, depending on how Arcega-Whiteside's development goes, depending on how much usage the running backs get out of the backfield, depending on if Nelson Aguilar, because Aguilar played well with Carson Wentz 2 years ago. So there are a lot of, hate this cliche, there are a lot of mouths to feed, but there is. You can't deny that. So for Deshaun Jackson, I am probably going to lean on him in my best ball leagues because Deshaun Jackson is a player that can give you 25 or 5. And that type of boom or bust variance I love on my best ball rosters. More Eagles news. Eagles beat writer Zach Rosenblatt is reporting Nate Sudfeld has had a rough go in the spring. So, you have Carson Wentz, who's been injured every year in some capacity since his junior or senior year in college, whenever he left. Your rookie year in the NFL, you deal with preseason ribs, you don't miss any time. Following year, you have the knee, you miss a couple of games. Last year, you have the back, miss even more games. However, the only difference is now there is no more Nick Foles. Having Nick Foles was a luxury for the Philadelphia Eagles because Carson Wentz went down. You have Nick Foles to step right in, look like a superstar, lead your team to a Super Bowl, lead your team to the playoffs last year. He's gone. He's in Jacksonville. And now the Eagles, who had the opportunity to go out and sign a competent veteran backup, no, they don't do that, right? That would make too much sense. Instead, the Eagles are rolling the dice and going to open 2019 with Nate Sudfeld as their quarterback, too. Nate Sudfeld, who obviously hasn't played a lot of football in his career. He's a virtual unknown. So if Carson Wentz, who, let's put the label on him, he's injury prone. If he goes down, you're going to lean on Nate Sudfeld to try to do what Nick Foles did. Here's Nate Sudfeld's career. 2018, 1 of 2 passing, 22 yards and a touchdown. 2017, 19 of 23, 134 yards. I mean, really? I get that he's completed, 82.6% of his passes in 2017, 50% of his passes last year, but he threw a combined 25 passes. I understand the hype around the Eagles. But if if Carson Wentz goes down, all these pieces that you have in place to make a run, they are meaningless because Nate Sudfeld will not do what Carson Wentz, what Nick Foles did for you. The Eagles also signed Cody Kessler, the defect from the Browns, and I believe he even moonlighted, started a few games for the Jacksonville Jaguars last year. So if Carson Wentz goes down, you're going to rely on Cody Kessler and Nate Sudfeld. Good luck, Eagles fans. Good luck. If Carson Wentz goes down, it is not, it is not going to be pretty. Excuse me. Have a tickle in my throat. Where are we? Eagles beat writer Zach Rosenblatt also believes that it's premature to expect Miles Sanders to become the team's RB1 in 2019. This goes in line to what I've been saying this whole time. Not only is Miles Sanders missing time right now with a hamstring injury, and I get it's early, but the significance, and I explained this on a show or two ago, anytime you have a young player or a rookie missing these minicamp reps, he is playing catch up with the rest of the team. If he's missing the reps, there is another player taking them, and if the other player is any good, he is making strides. He is going to make it to where the rookie playing catch up cannot catch up. And Miles Sanders has second-round draft capital behind him, and that's going to help. But the longer this hamstring injury lingers and the more time he misses, the longer it's going to take for him to take a significant leap in his rookie year. I think Jordan Howard, who is coming off of a year in which he handled 270 total touches, I think Jordan Howard is one of the biggest values in fantasy football. He can be had in the latter portion of the single-digit rounds, and that's where I'm taking my chances for Philadelphia Eagles running backs outside of Dynasty. In your standard redraft leagues, I am going to fade Miles Sanders, who right now owns a... Let's see, where is Miles Sanders' ADP? I just had it. 8th pick in the 7th round. I'm going to fade him. and take Jordan Howard almost a full round later with the 6th pick in the 8th, because I do believe Jordan Howard is going to see a tremendous amount of opportunities, especially on early downs. Sure, there's going to be some passing down touches left over for Sanders, and I do think he will flash and look like the player he will become. But he won't become the player we think he will become until 2020, when Jordan Howard has a different uniform on. In 2020, this is for you dynasty players. In 2020, Miles Sanders is going to be the 3-down back we all hope he will be this year. It's just not going to happen with Jordan Howard healthy and assumingly productive, because he will be playing behind in a better offensive line that he played behind with the Chicago Bears. Last but not least, out of Philadelphia, told you we had a ton of Eagles news. Rosenblatt also believes second-round receiver J.J. Arcega-Whiteside should be able to contribute right away. You know, Deshaun Jackson, Alshon Jeffrey, Nelson Aguilar is dealing with an injury. While Nelson Aguilar is dealing with his injury, Arcega-Whiteside has been showing out, especially in the red zone. I like Whiteside for the future, just like Miles Sanders. I'll probably take a shot on these rookies, definitely in Dynasty, for what they can do for me in the future. I like them in best ball because of their boom-bust variance. But as far as being an immediate, every-week impact player, as long as, you know, Deshaun Jackson and Alshon Jeffrey are healthy, I just don't see how there's going to be enough targets for Arcega-Whiteside to be an every-week productive player, which is why I like him in best ball. Now, we have seen Alshon Jeffrey miss time. We have seen Deshaun Jackson miss time. Should they miss time, then Arcega-Whiteside will be poised for an expanded target share. So I'm not opposed to drafting him. I would just draft him with tempered expectations, especially in your redraft. But in Dynasty, he is going to be one hell of a stash for 2020. And if you're stashing him and you're in Dynasty, you're probably playing with a few extra roster spots. So you might have to start him for a couple of weeks this year, and he will return value again, as long as Carson Wentz is healthy. If Carson Wentz is not healthy, stick a fork in all of your Eagles pass catchers outside of Zach Ertz. Stick a fork in the Philadelphia Eagles season, because if Carson Wentz goes down, that whole ship will sink. Moving out of Philadelphia, finally, 49ers beat writer Jennifer Lee Chan reporting. Receiver Dante Pettis is turning the right heads at minicamp last week. He is already projected to be the team's wide receiver 1. Dante Pettis is one of the best route runners in the NFL. He has put up tremendous numbers, albeit in a small sample size last year. And he did this with Nick Mullins as your quarterback. Debro had an awesome tweet that I will pull up right now about Dante Pettis last year. Remember Debro, he is one of the best guys in fantasy, one of my good friends in the business. Let's pull up what he did. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at Debro_FFB. He was on the show talking rookie tight ends and rookie quarterbacks about 6 weeks ago. Let's see where this Dante Pettis love tweet is. Here we go. Pettis versus zone coverage, 149.3 quarterback rating when targeted. He also scored 3 of his 5 touchdowns against the zone in weeks 12 to 15 as a starter, finished as a wide receiver 20, wide receiver 3, wide receiver 23, and the wide receiver 22. And he did this with small dick Nick Mullins. Think about what Dante Pettis is going to do with Jimmy Garoppolo. I feel like people are underestimating the effect and impact Jimmy Garoppolo is going to have on this 49ers team and the 49ers offense. NFL Network's Adam Rank projected the 49ers, I think, to go 3-13. Unless he's projecting Jimmy Garoppolo to suffer another injury, knock on wood, I don't see this team going 3-13. They have talent on both sides of the ball. They did a tremendous job adding defensive pieces and defensive pass rushers and defensive playmakers, whether it's Bosa, Quan Alexander, of course, they have DeForest Buckner. I mean, they have a ton. Jason Verrett, they added to play opposite of Richard Sherman. Of Verrett, if he can stay healthy, he could be one of the biggest value signings in free agency. This 49ers team all around, if they can stay healthy, is not only going to be one of the most improved teams in the NFL, but I believe that they will challenge at least for a wild card spot. And from a fantasy football perspective, Dante Pettis, don't forget about Marquise Goodwin. The rapport between Garoppolo and Goodwin, and their small sample size together, Goodwin played well enough to earn himself a pretty good contract last offseason. Kittle. These running backs, whether you were talking about Jerick McKinnon coming off the injury and finally getting some playing time, Tevin Coleman, who is going to handle the majority of the touches, especially on early downs. You have Breida and Mostert, so much depth. This offensive line is pretty good. This is a 49ers team that is going to take a tremendous leap from an NFL perspective and also from a fantasy football perspective. Do not sleep on this team. And Dante Pettis is going to play a big role. Deebo Samuel is already projected to be the 49ers wide receiver 2. You know, if you watched our last show, that my biggest issue with Deebo Samuel making that early impact is the fact that he did sit out of minicamp with a hip injury. If Deebo Samuel, now he did get in some work at OTAs before going down, so it is a new injury. But if this hip injury lingers into training camp, and I didn't, let me continue this with Miles Sanders. If his hamstring injury continues into training camp, this is where I worry about these rookies missing time. I get it. You're okay. Right now it's minicamp and OTAs. But if you start missing those training camp reps, stick a fork in you. You're done. At least for the first half of your year, because you are playing catch up. I don't see how significant Deebo Samuel's injury is. It is a new injury. So far, I'm seeing the missed time is indeed a setback. I am not seeing that his training camp status is in doubt, so that is okay. So all is well so far with Deebo Samuel, but if he misses any training camp time with this injury, then I will start to worry about what kind of impact he will have in year one. Moving out of San Francisco, Patriots beat writer Ben Volen reporting, N'Keal Harry didn't have the best minicamp, and I know people aren't going to want to hear this, but this was my worry when I was reacting to the draft and when I was reacting to the Patriots picking up N'Keal Harry. I think N'Keal Harry is a pretty good player. I think he is going to have every opportunity to shine in New England. New England is a team dare I say, that is in dire need of pass catchers. However, despite N'Keal Harry's draft stock, Bill Belichick doesn't care about draft stock and draft capital. Bill Belichick doesn't care about, if you signed a big-time veteran to a contract. He doesn't care. He cares about winning championships and Super Bowls and division titles and winning games. So if N'Keal Harry doesn't start looking the part sooner rather than later, then I wouldn't surprise me if he lost reps to a veteran like Dontrell Inman. Don't forget, Demaryius Thomas, who was coming off the Achilles, he's still on this depth chart. So it's not like the Patriots can't or won't pivot. I think N'Keal Harry absolutely positively better get it on track quick because of who Bill Belichick is and what he does. And if you're drafting N'Keal Harry in redraft, in Dynasty, I'll absolutely positively take chances on N'Keal Harry. Because some players take time to develop. But if we are seeing these reports, these negative reports about him getting up to speed, I am going to worry about what he is going to do early on in his NFL career, and this is per Ben Volin. Apparently, Harry struggled to get open facing quality cornerbacks like a Stephon Gilmore, and he also made, and I quote, a handful of mental mistakes, including lining up in the wrong spot. These are mistakes that Bill Belichick will not, he is not going to stand for it. Especially the mental mistakes. Bill Belichick expects you to come early, stay late, and prepare. I know it's early, but I don't know what the word I'm looking for. I don't want to pump the brakes because it is premature to say to pump the brakes. But am I worried the more negative reports that I see about mental mistakes and struggling? Yeah, I'm going to worry, and I am going to begin to fade N'Keal Harry in redraft. Now, in Dynasty, I would keep drafting him as you were. But in your season long, you don't have the luxury of next year. Season long is one and done. It's time to win now. And when you're looking at these players around N'Keal Harry, you're telling me you wouldn't rather have Christian Kirk, who is going to be a part of an offense that not only wants to pass the ball in Arizona, but they want to reportedly set records for how many plays they run. You wouldn't rather have a Christian Kirk who mirrors N'Keal Harry's ADP? Or how about the aforementioned Dante Pettis, who is sitting a spot after N'Keal Harry, third pick in the 8th round? Let me tell you something. In redraft, and maybe even in Dynasty, I would rather have Christian Kirk and Dante Pettis over N'Keal Harry. So there's that. Hopefully N'Keal Harry turns it around. But let's start to monitor these news stories, and this is why I love doing these new shows. Not only do I love talking NFL news, because I love to engulf myself, and I'm an NFL savant, but these NFL news stories and rumors, they will also help you win fantasy football championships, because let's say N'Keal Harry continues to struggle, and your everyday average Joe fantasy player who doesn't listen to this show, let's say that they are drafting N'Keal Harry. Hey, it's Brady. He's the number one receiver. or the number one receiver not named Julian Edelman in New England, and he's going to absolutely go off. And they don't know that he's making these mental mistakes, and they are drafting him ahead of Pettis and Kirk. Meanwhile, we're sitting here and we know to pump the brakes a little bit. And we know to pump the brakes and pivot to Kirk or Pettis. We have a head start over the other guy who isn't paying attention right now. Moving out of, actually, we do have one more tidbit of news in New England. Sony Michel, as we expected to hear, he did miss a little bit of time, and that is because he had a knee scope this offseason. To me, Sony Michel's ADP right around the 4th round is a little too high for my liking. Especially when Damian Harris is reportedly going to challenge Sony Michel for early down touches. And of course, we still have James White in PPR and as the primary pass-catching satellite back in New England. Let's see. Seahawks quarterback Russell Wilson told the press that second-round receiver DK Metcalf looks really, really special so far in the offseason program. I'm not a big DK Metcalf guy per se, but because of the potential opportunity that he has in front of him, he is going with the 9th pick in the 8th round. He is going right behind Geronimo Allison and right in front of Golden Tate. Now, you have N'Keal Harry, who was sandwiched in between Kirk and Pettis, and now you have Metcalf, who was sandwiched between Allison and Tate. If all those other players are gone, if Kirk, Harry, and Pettis are all gone, remember what I said, I would rather have Kirk or Pettis over Harry. Well, I'd rather take a shot on Metcalf over a Golden Tate, and quite possibly even over Geronimo Allison. And I like Geronimo Allison a lot. If you've watched the shows in the past, I talk up Geronimo Allison, and I think he is going to have a big role in Green Bay. But there also is the Marquez Valdes-Scantling factor. There is also the fact that Geronimo Allison has issues staying healthy. Whereas DK Metcalf, you have Tyler Lockett, and then you have DK Metcalf. And I get that David Moore gets a little buzz, and I get that Jerron Brown is getting a little buzz. But outside of Tyler Lockett, especially now with Doug Baldwin retired, the opportunity for DK Metcalf is tremendous. DK Metcalf could very well be the number 2 pass catcher for the Seattle Seahawks when it's all said and done. He could very well finish number 2 or at worst number 3 on the team in targets. And although his agility drills were terrible, he has tremendous size and speed. And I do believe Russell Wilson will exploit all of the positive traits and the positive metrics that DK Metcalf owns. So if I am taking a shot at a rookie receiver in the 8th round, it's probably going to be DK Metcalf as we stand right now. And I do personally have a few DK Metcalf shares, and I have none of N'Keal Harry, but a lot of that is because of where I am drafting in my rookie drafts. I am usually taking a running back over Harry, or I'm moving the pick, moving back to get, a Paris Campbell and a Justice Hill. As we're winding the show down, Jets general manager Joe Douglas is touting Robbie Anderson as and I quote, very pleasant surprise. Robbie Anderson is probably going to open the year as the Jets wide receiver 1. We have seen Robbie Anderson finish as a top 20 receiver a few years ago. now you factor in Le'Veon Bell, you factor in Sam Darnold quite possibly taking a tremendous second-year leap, and we could see Robbie Anderson all of a sudden flirting with legit wide receiver 2 fantasy football value. And this is for a player with an ADP 11th pick in the 6th round. He is going behind Alshon Jeffrey in front of Will Fuller. I like Robbie Anderson a lot. I think the opportunity is going to be there. Yes, there is Jamison Crowder. Yes, there is Quincy Enunwa. Both of those players have injury concerns coming with them. They are also your versatile slot receivers, where Robbie Anderson is your big play wide receiver 1 type of wideout in New York. So if you can't get your hands on a DJ Moore earlier in the 6th, and you don't quite trust Will Fuller because of his injury concerns, and you don't want to go for an Alshon Jeffrey because you're worried about Zach Ertz and Whiteside and Deshaun Jackson, Robbie Anderson is that gem late in the 6th round who could legitimately put up wide receiver 2 numbers when it's all said and done. Outside of that, that'll do it for today's show. Thanks for listening. It was a loaded new show that, although it only focused on a few teams, I think they were some of the biggest takeaways from Minicamp. If you're listening right now on podcast format, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Spreaker, Google Podcasts, Amazon Alexa, Spotify, the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast Network, and especially you Apple Podcast users, or any user of a podcast platform that allows you to leave us a 5-star rating and review, please, please, please subscribe to the FF Faceoff. Please leave us a 5-star rating and a 5-star review telling everyone why you love the FF Faceoff and why we are the best damn fantasy football podcast where fantasy meets reality. Because the more ratings, reviews, subscriptions we get, the more people we can reach. And in the end, we want to help each and every one of you win fantasy football championships, dominate your leagues, and absolutely positively crush the competition. We will maintain the culture of winning we've built here on the FF Faceoff for over 200 episodes and over 2 years, soon to be 3 years since our inception. We have had a few more 5-star ratings come in and at least one more review, so I thank you for that. They help us in such a big way. It helps us get more exposure, and it helps us get in front of more eyes and ears, and that is the name of the game. Like I said, we want to help each and every one of you win fantasy football championships and dominate your leagues. Be sure to check out the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast Network that not only features the FF Faceoff, but it has over 24 hours a week of podcast programming, of fantasy football programming, DFS, Dynasty, news, notes, nuggets, you name it, we have it at the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast Network. Go to your podcast provider and search out Full-Time Fantasy Podcast, and you will see all of the great options we have featured at the network. My name is Anthony Cervino. Follow me on Twitter at The Real NFL Guru. Follow the show at the FF Faceoff. Thanks again for listening. I will be coming back at you later in the week, possibly with a mock draft. We haven't did one of those in a while, so we will be most likely coming back to you with a mock. Until then, have a great rest of the day, and I will see you when I see you.
Friday night, Sunday brunch, it does not matter. Facts are facts, queen. Every cigarette can cut your life short. Find that hard to believe? Then tap the banner for more. This free life. Freedom to be tobacco free.